Yes. Track Overtime on my Nom de Plume album. We can't figure out when it was. It was sometime after 2009 and before 2015. I guess we'll get to that.
Oh yeah.
But DJ Drez on the
Right.
cuts, always nice, always nice. And I will say before we go back into this, I still make music. I still make albums. I still rap and stuff. And it's important to have cuts on your hip hop projects,
So
and and pay them even if they're your homies. Like, like just it ain't gotta be mega because you're partners. You might be collabing on something. Maybe they need a verse or some art later, but just drop a little Venmo something, But just make sure you have scratching on your album if you're a hip hop producer or MC, please.
it's one of the things that makes it that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's official. So we here at Art to Empire, we're talking about the relationship of art and business and how these people that we've been featuring on this podcast woven this into the life. So one of the biggest things, the most challenging things that we face as artists is pricing.
Yeah.
So what are some of the hardest things for you or an artist to figure out how to monetize or how to price their work? Like, how do you price it?
That has been an issue, n- just in life. And the other thing with me is, I I've been married for a long time,
Hmm.
and so anything I do in my business um, is a choice that I have to make for my family. I have two kids. And not only that, also to be clear, just to rewind throughout this whole thing, is like my girl um, has supported me
Right.
in this, in all the ways that you could support someone.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's a big deal to have someone in your corner. So that alone is just a special blessing. Whether it's a lover or just a good friend, like
Right.
they're good to have around. Like people who really care about you and support you. And I acknowledge those people in my life.
Yeah.
Like it's a big deal. Um, and also, those people are the ones who get frustrated and sometimes will put you in your place of
Yes.
like, you're doper than that,
I've
or
I've had those
you know,
conversations with your wife when we were on tour,
yep,
and I'll be like, "Yo, this is going on." She's like, "No, no, no, no. Have them talk to me, because no, we're not doing that again."
yeah,
I'm like, "Okay, so should I pay you?" Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
or whatever
exactly.
it is, which is important, right? Because
It's important.
yeah,
Like that's one of the big things with me is I'll stick up for myself,
right,
but I pick my battles,
right,
which means like I'm not a super jump to fight, jump to argue.
right,
Um, it's just yeah, I observe that kind of thing and take notes.
right, right,
Um,
right, right,
and so pricing, like the other thing is this: I love what I do,
right,
and you have to um, come up with a number that you're good with. You
right,
you don't you can do some comparison. It's very helpful.
right,
Um, and at the same time, there's this like uh, there's you talk about tools. Like
right,
there's a handful of things that I live by, or things that I try to live by
right.
that I acknowledge in life and keep going back to. And one of those things is acknowledging. This is a quote from somebody, I don't even know who, but
Right.
that comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm. Yeah.
And so you could learn a lot, and it could be useful. It could be very inspiring.
Right.
Um, and that's not the type of comparison I'm talking about. I'm talking about jealousy or he's getting paid more, or
Right. Right.
that,
Right.
whatever. Um, so you need to pick a price that you'll be happy with,
Right.
one that a price that you won't go under,
Right.
and uh, yeah, I
So
mean,
what are some factors that go into determining the price you feel comfortable with and the price you won't go under?
um, I have a minimum, and that will be the minimum if I don't know the person. If there's
Right.
or the kind of event. I ask a lot of questions.
Right.
I
Right.
usually, oftentimes, it someone may contact me through social media, email,
Right.
whatever. Like there's various ways, and sorry, I'm really being thrown off. Um, can you edit this? Okay.
Nope, not gonna edit it. It's
Oh, you're not
real
gonna edit.
raw,
Oh, word.
like
Okay, I
hip
appreciate
hop.
that.
Yeah, we ain't editing it.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's because I'm thinking about something else, and then I'm hearing the squeak in the background. Um,
Live elements, man.
and
Live
also
rounds.
I'm observing what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Right.
I
Right.
don't know who's gonna listen to this. Um, I I will still do events for free,
Right.
like things for good
So what? Yeah.
causes,
What
like
predicates a free show versus like max pay show?
Oh, okay. I know what I was going to say. Just as far as like the various ways people contact me,
Right. Right.
um, always still like I require a phone call. Also,
Right.
I want to hear the vibration of this person, where
Mm-hmm.
they're coming from, and usually,
Right.
reading text
Right.
on.
Helvetica doesn't always share the.
No,
Right.
it
Right.
doesn't. So I need to know where they're coming from, and not to say that that will change the price.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying like I get more from that. I have more of an understanding because, again, we're talking about art,
Right.
and
Right. 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 Right.
art is not always something that can be read about. Um, so I have a cost that is a minimum, and that along with that is all travel and hotel, lodging, whatever.
Right.
Um, so there might be some situations where I'm sensitive, and I'm a compassionate human,
Right.
and like occasionally, somebody will hit me up, and I will go under my minimum,
Right.
but there is even a minimum, like there's a real minimum.
So there is like a community minimum or a cultural minimum,
There
and then
there
there's like the corporate minimum.
Yes, there can be.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not set. Like you don't have a chart.
Yeah, I don't it's
It's a
not
set
set.
of internal equation of like who they are, what it's about,
Yeah.
where it is, how big it
Time,
is,
how many
time.
people? Yeah, I ask
Right.
all you got to know all those,
Right. I think that's huge. Like asking lots of questions to the potential client to help you spatially understand what you're getting into, what the scale is.
Yeah. Not only that, but the other thing is this that I have to acknowledge about myself is I've been doing it a long time.
Right.
And that oftentimes, like, there's simply for the knowledge that I give someone over the phone,
Right.
like, there's people who charge, there's consultants who charge
Yeah.
for event consultant
Yeah. Yeah.
that I am helping them with by having that conversation. And I'm not even charging for that.
Right.
But I have that experience.
Right.
So, yeah, it does vary sometimes, but ultimately there is a minimum. And I mean, I'm not going to say what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
mean, it flex. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not crazy, and it's
Right.
not nothing either.
But you're aware
So,
of it. Like you are aware of.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think all those tools that you just spoke about is like you've found ways to gather information to help you understand, and then based upon what you've learned, then you automatically almost have this like calculation of numbers that's going on while you're asking questions. It's moving it up. It's moving it down.
yeah.
It's moving it. So what were some of the biggest mistakes that you have made in pricing over your career?
I mean, the biggest one is just charging too low for so many years because I love it, and and not only that, but I'm not like I know how to follow, and I am inspired by many people and things and art in life.
Right.
With that being said, I'm not, though I know how to follow, or I'm not a follower.
Right. Right. Well, it's a team player. It sounds
So
like.
yeah,
Like, I'm down to be a part of the band. I don't need to be the lead.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
like it's all good. I'm
Yeah.
more than comfortable and very happy to support people,
Right.
whether it's an MC, a band, or a yoga teacher.
Right. Right.
Like across the board. And with that being said, I am not a follower.
Right.
I've I've stepped into a lot of places that no DJ ever has before,
Right.
and um, and with that, there needs to be, or I acknowledge that there has needed to be um, other forms of paying dues or
Right. Right.
repaying dues because it's a new situation or
Right.
whatever.
It's a new lane. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I've been on many stages that have never had a DJ or
Right.
something where like you're plugging in or what they think of as electronic.
Right. Right.
You know
Right.
what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good answer. Cause so yeah, just now is you said one of the biggest mistakes would be underpricing.
Mhm.
Have you ever made the mistake, or is there even a possibility of overpricing?
Um, there's been like a couple times where they didn't have the the power. They didn't know how much. Like working with a new promoter,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, it would be a situation like this.
Right.
Working with a new promoter that just think, oh, it's you. Like they're gonna people like everyone here loves you,
They
and
just
they're gonna
expect the
show up.
world, everybody who ever liked you was going to show up.
Yeah,
Right. Right. Right.
they don't realize the work that they have to do.
Right.
Like, just I mean, we've both experienced shows that the the lineup is exceptional
Yeah.
and the performances are solid,
Right.
but there's 15 people that showed up, and you know,
Yep.
and that is what it is.
Yeah.
Like it's very humbling to be in a place that holds, you know, 500 people and you got 22 people there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like these things happen, guys, everyone out there listening, and no matter who it is.
Yeah.
And then later you hear, what? You were in whatever,
Right.
random Maine, and I didn't know about it. It's just like,
Right.
the guy said he did his job,
So they
but, or
promoted, but
whatever. Um, and that just is what it is.
yeah.
So there's times where you feel bad, like, oh, like I know you didn't make your money.
Right.
With that being said, I did my job
Right. Period.
because when I'm hired for something, like I'm all in. I'm showing up and I'm
Right.
doing my shit for real.
Right.
If there's 5 people in the crowd or
Or
whatever,
5,000, you're gonna
or
do the
5,000,
full show. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's maybe I'll have some promoters this episode. I mean, this season, because like I occupy artist, tour manager, promoter, booking agent,
hmm
and I think part of my secret sauce is I understand the artist's perspective and how they value, and I also understand the promoters how they perspective and how they value. And my goal is to get them to be kind of more kumbaya so we can all keep doing this longer. So
word,
I've had to explain to some artists like these promoters, you want them to be around
straight
for a
up,
long time. So if they're good to you, work with them so that you can one show for 10 racks where he loses his ass and he's not in business anymore is not as good as 15 shows over 5 years at 3 grand, so to
exactly,
speak.
straight up.
And so
So
yeah, yeah.
and with that being said, you really need to weigh it out and understand. Um, and I'll ask people, and I ask from my own knowledge of
Right.
life because
Right.
that is how I learn by asking questions.
Right.
But I'll ask people, oh, what do you do? Like, how do you make a living? This, that,
Right.
because my compassion for humanity and someone who wants to keep this moving
Yeah.
and wants to see somebody succeed, those are factors.
Yep.
Oftentimes, it's like the other thing is what it took for me to get here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean is not only all the pre-business stuff that we had to talk about and do,
Right.
but making sure that my equipment is all up to date and in
Right.
full working order, making sure that I have childcare, all
Right.
the
Right.
flights, things like
Yes.
there's real life
A
adult
lot to go.
stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I can't give them a deal. Like I am showing up in full for you. You need to show up in full for me by promoting this
Right.
and getting people there.
Do your part.
I'm doing my yeah. A lot of people because of social media, a lot of promoters because of social media, they I mean, they'll have it in contracts, and I
Right.
understand that to post this many times,
Yep.
this many stories, this many
Yeah.
posts, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that's all fine and well. We'll do that. But it's really your job
Right. Like,
to.
right. I'm here to assist. Like, I'm not here to lead the
I'm
promoting
playing, yeah,
charge.
yeah, exactly. I'm playing my role. You have to play
Right.
yours. That needs to be acknowledged.
Right.
And that's why oftentimes the price does stay the price. It's
Yeah.
because I'm showing up, I'm there. And it took me a while to get there also
Right.
because I, I really do care. And
Yeah.
like I see the lives that people live because I'm living it. Like
Yeah.
I know about struggle. I know about all the life stuff.
Yeah.
And
All the yeah.
yeah,
And I think like, you know, people have to like people in the sense that people we do business with have to earn the camaraderie and respect to then work. Like maybe we'll give them a deal here and there. Like if we've done business for years,
that's a whole other story.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
but but those are earned the same way. It's earned on our end. Like we've done a good job long enough to where that promoter wants to keep working with us.
Exactly.
So it's a relationship thing. I try to help remind people that it's a symbiotic thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
for the culture to work, we need artists, we need tour managers, merch guys, DJs, promoters, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So if any one of them is feeling like they're being taken for granted
Yeah.
for too long, one goes away, it's a whole different energy. Versus it being like a football game where like the promoter's the defense and the artist is the offense, and the whole goal is to score.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give her to who cares about the promoter, you know? So all right,
I think this is just a little side note. I think that givers, I'm by nature I'm a giver.
right,
By nature, I think you're a giver.
yes,
You know, and the way people lose us is by burnout.
yep,
And it's just like if you just keep asking, and there's never give and acknowledgement.
yep,
Like so, I think that that's also something just crucial. Just whether you're running your team in your high rise, whatever business that is, or you're running a band, to acknowledge the people that, especially the givers, the
yep,
one who find pleasure in giving and who bring value to your business,
yeah,
to really acknowledge that, because a lot of people you're working with are just there for the dollar.
yep.
And anyway, that's
It's
just
a big
that's
deal.
just-
And
yeah.
it's a good transition too. My wife's reading a book about burnout.
Mm.
And it talks about one of the biggest things that creates burnout in your workforce is lack of gratitude,
Yep.
lack of acknowledgement, lack of appreciation. Sometimes acknowledging they're doing a good job and you really appreciate their work will get you through a time when maybe you can't make payroll,
Straight up.
or you got burned on a show and you can't pay everybody what you thought. But
Yeah.
if you're like, it goes such a long way and it's so overlooked because we've all experienced it. So you're talking about being a giver and just our styles, and this leads into it. So both of us started our entrepreneurship art to empire stuff and Lane being of service to specific other people to where we're a part of their team for long periods of time. And we're a lot alike in the sense that if I get burned, I'm not going to yell, I'm not going to scream. I'm just going to withdraw energy and go somewhere else. And then now they don't have access to me the way they used to. And I used to get guff in my early days because some of the artists that I managed would tell me I'm not hard enough. I don't yell enough. The other people don't respect me because I'm not in their face. And I would say I'm not that manager. If they burn me, great. I'll just never mess with them again. That's how I do it.
Straight up.
So, that reality that it's time to make that transition. And you've made that transition, from where you were primarily around hip hop and reggae scenes, being the DJ for artists and bands and doing gigs that were associated with that, to this other realm of yoga and meditation and stuff. And, from many different angles, only social media tells us what it tells us. It doesn't tell us how or why or when. So
Yeah.
a lot of people have all types of crazy assumptions of like, who's Drez now? What is really going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted to give you a platform both now. Let's go into it. Like, why did you make that transition on personally and business wise?
Yeah. Well, personally, like the practice of yoga was meant just to balance life for me. So, and what I'm talking about, literally all the aspects, mentally, spiritually,
Right.
and everything in between and beyond. And and the thing is, this is I already had a deep love for Indian music, for instance, and that happened because of hip hop. For me, hip hop is, and it's not just for me. Like if you really look at hip hop is so much deeper than uh, two turntables and a microphone.
Right.
And what I mean is, if you look at the way hip hop, especially made in the golden era of hip hop, and what hip hop really is, because people talk about certain styles being old school,
Right.
and it's not that they're old school. It's just that's what hip hop is.
Right.
So, hip hop samples from everywhere. It's an encyclopedia of music and knowledge because of what's spoken about and people's experiences. So, I learned one of the things that I learned about hip hop was that I loved Indian music.
Right.
I didn't know that, but through hip hop showed me that.
What I'm trying. I'm not. I'm gonna try not to send you on a tangent.
Word,
So,
word, okay.
when did you first experience Indian music and hip hop? Because I have Eric B. and Rakim Paid in Full remix is what I think of. But like, what hip hop did you hear that really brought you to Indian music?
Okay, all right. So that's one of them, which is not Indian.
Right.
So,
Which is Middle Eastern.
but so
Is that right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So early on, it was that there was I think one of the remixes of you know pump up the volume. They sampled it, Rakim, but the Mars.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
called
Yeah.
Mars.
Mars. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 There's I think probably some Arabic samples
Pump.
in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
You know,
I would try to sing it right now and completely just
word.
ruin
Yeah,
it, so
yeah.
I
I'm not gonna
won't.
try.
But yeah.
So but those samples were some of the beginning. Like
Right.
I just like I get the chills thinking about it. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
um, also just like the hearing the call to prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to think what song. I don't know if it was Brand Nubian or whatever.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I
Is that
can't think.
Allahu
But
Akbar on the?
Allah, I'm gonna
Ooh,
like
yeah,
it's just
that first.
beautiful. Like I am drawn to that sound.
Right.
Of I think of it as like a sound of the East,
There you yeah.
and it's not specific um, to the Arab worlds or to Egypt. Like it goes
Right.
throughout Asia and
Right.
Africa, different parts of Africa, including places like Ethiopia and Eritrea and but not only that into South America, like even like people like the most popular that people would know of was like the Gypsy Kings,
Right. Right.
where
Right.
it's not limited by the Western notation.
Right.
The notes bend and the scales are different, and
Mm.
so I was just really drawn to that sound,
Right.
and so it's not just Indian music, but that whole thing.
It's like
And
like you said, Call to the East is a really great way to envelope all of it without disrespecting any
that's my best
specific
way to
part.
say it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And with that being said,
Wow.
there's songs that I started hearing like when I started practicing yoga in like the early 2000s.
Right.
So back to that, like I started practicing to bring balance.
Right.
And then I was hearing the music and I was just like, I'd be in a yoga class and be like, oh, that's dope. Like,
Mm.
and I had already been making tracks with
Right. For
Indian samples from
years.
old Indian records. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you go back and listen to like mixtapes, like,
Like Jata Beat was that
like,
one of the
well,
earlier ones?
Jata Beat was an album.
Right.
But
Okay.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
if you go back to like Easy Street, for instance,
Right. Okay.
you'll hear instrumentation like sitar and not only that, but just what the Western world calls world music.
Right.
I was deeply into that. I was
Right.
deeply into music from Africa, and
Right.
not only that, but things indigenous instrumentation like the didgeridoo
Right.
and stuff like that. Like just very strong draw that felt and feels like home to me.
Right. Right.
So yeah, you could hear that on tapes that I did in the 90s.
Right.
And then eventually start producing, and what am I sampling? I'm sampling these old records I got.
Right.
And then the deeper I get into yoga, um, one of the big draws for me with yoga was that it was a mind-body discipline, and how strong the spiritual aspect was, and that it was a practice that acknowledges sound. There's a yoga of sound, and not only that, but just Om,
Yeah.
is part of the practice, and chanting and all that. So I was hearing like Om Namah Shivaya, like in yoga class. I'm like, wait, I have an old record with that on it. Like I didn't know I was listening to that type of stuff.
Right.
And I couldn't afford to go to yoga. It was expensive for me even back then.
Right.
Especially doing these $100, $200,
Right. Yeah.
$300 hip
Ooh.
hop shows. Like, and so the teacher was like, hey, if you DJ a class, you could come for free. And every time you DJ one, I'm going to give you a private lesson. So the combination of that and me seeing myself sitting cross-legged with turntables,
Right.
that was all around the same time. So it was a manifestation that was also, it was coming out of me, and it was also coming towards me from somewhere else.
Right.
And so I DJ my first yoga class. And
What year was that? What range?
I started practicing probably around 2001, 2002,
Damn.
maybe.
Yeah.
And then it was a couple years after that, I guess. Because I gave it some time. I really was going slow with the practice, and I wasn't
Right.
just going to jump in. So by the time I DJ'd a yoga class, I had an understanding of that I'm actually holding space sonically.
Right.
And
The respect was there.
the respect was there, and also the knowledge of the arc of the class,
Right,
and all
right.
that. And keep in mind, I'm still touring.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at thinking 2001, like we did
Oh,
Cali
yeah.
Com in 2004, so we were around each other.
Oh yeah, I was already practicing.
Damn,
Yeah.
I
So
should have
2000.
inquired before, man. My hip flexors and my whole vibe would have been
No,
whole different.
but I remember having conversations with you back then.
Yeah.
Even we spoke about breath, we spoke about tantra,
Yeah.
which a lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah,
think
yeah.
a lot of people think is just as sexual, but
Right.
it's not.
Yep.
The tantric practice, like hatha yoga,
Yeah.
is part of tantra. And what the very simple, easy way to explain it is tantra is a way of living and acknowledging that you are in your body
Right.
and you're on earth and you're here to experience that.
Right.
And that's the very simple way. So hatha yoga, which is asana, which is the posture portion of yoga, is a tantric practice.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but you would remember me, probably see me sitting
Oh, dude,
with my legs crossed
I
in the
remember
car,
the
and
stretches and the folds and just
all
like
the mudras and
yeah. It's funny. I saw it, and I just tied it to just your call to consciousness, and it was through the music you selected before the show, the sounds that you chose for production, like, and that's what's so cool. Is like I always, when I came into really getting to know you, you were like, the wise big homie. And then every now and then you would crack some funny ass joke that would snap me out of it. That would remind me of the range. Like
Word.
you don't lose goofy and silly and even sometimes crass as you attain more and more self enlightenment.
Yeah.
And we were kind of running parallels from different places on that. And so it's really cool to see it. And as much as I've known you, what you've said in the last 15 minutes is like, oh, yes, fuck.
That's the truth.
And I think a lot of people, when they hear this, who had confusion or just not understanding or even maljudgment,
Yeah.
will go, it fully makes sense. It's linear.
Word.
Now, talk to me about the business side of it. Because, like, for example, we've talked about when we're working for someone else, whether it's an artist or a job, they're dictating our value for the most part. We can negotiate, but they're dictating. It's their world. It's their business. It's their empire. At some point in time, we stepped out, either forcefully or it was just your time. I think I was kind of snapped out of it because my management world, like, I was snapped. It was a sudden jar at the height of momentum. Shit just came to an end as far as that with my main artist. So I just was jolted out of it.
Yeah.
And once I kind of came to, after the hurt and the anger, was the liberation and rememberment of my value aside from that. And then I found lanes, and very quickly I was like, oh, there's way more fruit on the trees for what I have to offer over here. And I was just compressed in this lane. Like I thought I was only worth whatever it was, like, So,
Yeah. So I just have to say this is going back to me not being a follower,
yeah,
but knowing how to follow. Like, it's all good.
right,
Like, I just got to say that. Like, is I always looked at hip hop as innovative,
right,
expansive, like always it as alive and moving forward, and just creative, just stupid creative. Like it's amazing. And so me veering, you know what I mean? Like I've never left my hip hop path.
right,
I roll with a sonic machete. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Like I saw a jungle. I saw a space that I wanted to explore on my hip hop spaceship.
right,
You know what I'm saying?
right, right,
And so I've just expanded what it is.
right,
Because hip hop has the capacity to do that.
right,
And what I mean partially is to not just talk to, and mind you, like there's a good handful of people who walk the walk of the deep knowledge they speak on.
right,
And there's a lot that don't,
right.
but still speak deeply. And it makes you believe. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just like, whoa, I believe in you and that, and I want to be into that. And then you learn, like you might meet them or hang out, and you're like, oh, that's not the truth. But that just is what it is. Everybody's human,
Yep.
so all good. But for me, I want to actually walk on that path.
Right.
That's why I got my sonic machete to like, I want to go that way.
Right, right.
So I'm going to actually step into places where no one has ever stepped in with turntables before.
Right, right.
And so that's what I did. I've done that for hip hop. I've done that for me, and I'm a hip hopper.
Right.
Like, and I've done it through hip hop, whether hip hop realizes it or not.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, and that's as far as taking the that yoga, that mind-body discipline, and going deep into it.
Right.
Not just personally, but with my music also.
Right.
So that's what I've done, and it was natural evolution for me, but it also wasn't. That was not planned. It
Right,
wasn't like I'm
right.
stepping away from hip hop. It is more like I am walking the path of hip hop with hip hop
Right.
into this because I can.
Right.
And so so there's that.
Right.
And as far as the business and I think it's beyond business. I think it's more of a creative thing in
Right,
just the way
right.
we function in life. But I'll speak about it from a business side. There's a great quote, and it's something like dream big or work for somebody who does.
Right, right.
And I wasn't necessarily thinking about that, but because of my own expansion and the change in hip hop that had happened and was happening,
Right.
I am from the era that it is all one. When I started playing, like I'm DJing over here, I'm looking out at the room, there's circle
Right,
of,
right.
groovers, b-boys doing their thing. Some of the riders are hanging out over there,
Right.
in their books. There's, guys or girls dancing, whatever. It's as one.
Yeah.
As 90s goes on, we start to like veer,
Splices,
veer.
very
It
much
starts
so.
to
Yeah.
separate. The rapper, as always, is put out in the front.
Right.
And so there's a whole lot of rap music being made.
Right.
There starts to be b-boy events, which I DJ'd.
Right.
But they were really mainly about dancing.
Yep.
it's a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
and it's also separation.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's DJ events
Right. Which
that
turntablism
it's
was,
just
yep.
a bunch of dudes scratching,
Right.
and a lot of these guys, they own 20 records. They're not actual DJs.
Right.
They fit into the category of hip hop and turntablism and whatnot, but they're just scratching. They're not
Like
really.
they're more turntablists than specific than DJs.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
and almost not even hip hoppers either.
Right. Right. Because
Which
they're
is
not part of the.
it's a trippy thought,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's the same with
so
graffiti artists. A lot of graffiti
that's
artists have nothing to do with hip hop.
right. So I watched
But it's
hip
a
hop
trip.
go from, if you show up at the club, you're a hip hopper, you take part in the culture,
Yeah.
to now there's fans of hip hop. You
Right.
like all kinds of genres,
Right.
but you like this one artist who happens to be a hip hopper. So
Right,
watching
right,
all
right.
that change, there's disappointment to be had.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And all of us have felt it who've been in it long enough. And you watch the crowd change. Oh, the crowd isn't vibing like
Right.
the way they used to, and that's a whole other hole I could jump into
Right.
on the whys and hows.
Right.
But so it was all this change, and it was just like, if hip hop could do that and is going to do that,
Right.
it's doing it within me, but it's also going to do it outside of me. I mean, it's doing it outside of me.
Right.
So I'm going to let it do it within me.
Right.
And so I took it further into the disciplines and the spirituality.
Right.
And not only that, but this is just like a little side note, like because you brought it up, is I specifically like can get really silly and even crass and
Right.
sarcastic
Right.
with my jokes and stuff,
Right.
because I am most interested in learning,
Right.
and I've been put on a pedestal in ways,
Right.
and in some situations and spiritually and whatnot,
Right.
where it's just like, nah, like I'm a student,
Right,
and
right,
I
right.
want to be that. Don't look up to me like that.
Right.
And I have that's a whole other
Yeah.
that's a whole other podcast.
Different podcast.
But it does, it all leaks into business for me,
Right.
and
So-
and art, because it is me.
Well, it's woven.
Like,
I mean,
it's totally woven.
so I'm gonna try to do my best at pinpointing the last 20 minutes of this conversation, but what I will.
Hey, I apologize.
No,
I
this is
know.
great. This is great. This is Drez. I've gotten. How many hours do you think we spent in a car in a hotel together? So much.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel for the people listening and just discovering you for the first time, or people who've seen you from afar, because there's so much. There's so much more to you than an hour or 2 hours can share.
Word.
So I hope they're curious to keep looking and listening. And but one thing I'll say about culturally, before we really pinpoint to the business part of this that you're in now, is hip hop. When we were growing up, we're like second or third generation, right? From like the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still from the era where hip hop was created by music, by using music and sounds that were not labeled hip hop
Yep.
to make hip hop.
Straight up.
Hip hop was never made from hip hop.
Yep.
So the curiosity of jazz and weird Swedish rock records and all the curiosity was built in us because our producers and DJs gathered sound and they curated the sound into one thing that then became hip hop. But we watched as we were coming of age that hip hop became hip hop, and it had to look a certain way, had to sound a certain way. And then it started getting more funneled and more tight. And it was never like, no, hip hop could be you just spinning only African rhythms over break beats.
Yep.
And neither the breakbeat nor the African rhythm was in an aisle at the record store called hip hop.
Exactly.
And so I could dig that, and you wove it in great. So now, you were, I'm going to try to say it as black and white as possible. You were DJing a lot for really amazing underground hip hop artists.
Yes.
And those artists and that genre of our richness of music, the attendance of the shows changed. And even when it was at its heyday, it was still at finite compared to. So now you switched lanes, and now there's way more people at your events. So that's got to have a positive monetary effect right? Like a DJ gig at a hip hop show, an underground hip hop show opening for,
It's uncomparable.
right.
Yeah.
So how does, I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna, it's obvious how it benefits you because you can eat more and you can pay more rent and can get an EV like we can be all like these adults. But like, just that, like when you started getting paid in this world that you're in now, was there like this retrospective like light bulb moment? Like, oh man, like I was over here for so long scraping for, and now I just had to just literally take what I've got and move a little bit to the left or to the right, and there's a whole nother like garden of just
It 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 may look like that, but it wasn't even close to that.
right,
It went from
because you were in the early, like you
I
were
was I'm
right.
there was no the pictures you see me post, they didn't exist before me.
Mm-hmm.
The turntables, or whatever DJ gadgets, like they didn't exist before me.
Right.
I'm not saying that there was never a someone who DJ'd a yoga class.
Right.
I'm not saying that. I don't need to be the first. I'm
Right.
fine. You know what I
Right.
mean? With that being said, I'm the first, and this is through talking to a couple like people like Dum Dum Project who were in New York, and
Right.
and he was like, we would DJ classes. One of the guys from Dum Dum Project, who was like were some of the first guys in that world to put like hip hop beats under like mantra,
Okay.
and they were saying that like when we were DJing at Jiva Mukti in the '90s, we would all practice and then we'd play like after the class. I was coming from a place of being a yoga practitioner and already had Indian kind of remixes, mashups, stuff like that.
Yep.
Things with devotional music that I didn't realize was like devotional, like mantras.
Right.
And,
Right.
so I was, okay, so there's that.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so, but I'm coming into this as, people are like, oh, a DJ? Like, there's
Right.
plenty of people who are like, that's weird.
Like, why do you even need a DJ?
Why would there
right.
even be a DJ for a yoga class?
Right,
The yoga
right.
and music thing wasn't what it is now.
Right.
I'm one of the people that paved that road.
Like help create
And
value and relevance
yeah,
for a DJ
and
at a yoga studio or an event. Is that what you
yes,
mean?
yeah, like there, yeah, and then whatever. That just is what it is.
Right.
But the idea that it was popping, and I just started getting paid and all that. No,
Right.
but I did go in there. I had to change a lot of minds,
Right.
because people, a lot of people think DJ, they think electronic music,
Right.
and I don't like that in there,
Right.
whatever.
Right. Right. Right.
It's just like I don't do that yet.
Right.
Like that's not me.
Right.
You have to, listen and see. I've changed so many minds,
Right.
and I dealt with a lot of ignorant people,
Right.
and it was my wife explained this. Marty Nico, shout out, baby.
Blech.
She was like, we were talking about it. This is a couple years ago. She was
Yeah.
like, it was a culture shock for you. She said, you might, and I did realize it at the time,
Right.
but it's very different
Oh yeah.
going from underground hip hop world, clubs, all that, to now DJing. One of the first studios that I ever played at, it was called Exhale. It's in Venice, and yeah, it's Venice, and there's a lot of dope shit about Venice, but there's still a lot of affluent,
Yeah. Yeah.
white people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
And like a lot of them were, and not exclusively, but like that's what a lot of the crowd was.
Right.
And that's what a lot of the musicians were.
Right.
And I just heard things different. I was coming from a different place, and I'm just like, I love the traditional Indian music and the other music, but like the new age kind of stuff, just it wasn't my thing. It felt watered down
Right. Right.
from my experience and from what I was into. Also spiritually, as a Rasta man who
Right.
may have a little bit more understanding of the sadhu, which is it's a very similar life.
Right.
the
Oh,
people who
Sadu and Rasta.
Sadhu, yeah, it's
Right.
beat,
Okay.
um, and that's a whole other
Yeah.
podcast. So
Yeah.
I'm
No,
not.
I
I'm
mean,
gonna.
just
I'm gonna
sprinkle
skip.
it. Okay,
So,
sprinkle it in because it's
so,
important. I
yeah.
like it.
Um, but all this being said is I had to change a lot of minds, and there was a lot of ignorance wrapped up in it too. Um, just levels, which again, probably another podcast.
Yeah,
Um,
but
but so
really quick,
I had to.
while
Oh,
you're
go on.
saying that, you were telling me a story about a prominent figure who brought you in to possibly DJ their studio,
Mm-hmm.
and they were telling you that you were too deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, like, while you're explaining this, it's almost like that voice is telling you, like, you're going into a place where you're way deeper with your appreciation, education, respect of the specifics of the culture, movement of the music and its involvement. So you might have to, because you're gonna come across. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, yeah,
Is interesting. So with my respect for the practice, the postures, the
right,
asana practice, plus the mantra, everything, and my strong desire to learn, I did a yoga teacher training myself
mm-hmm.
and became certified and all that type of stuff. Again, all of this was just by natural evolution.
Right,
The plan, though, was once I started doing is to do it well, to do it respectfully, do it well,
right,
and to not let people dumb down what I do, to
right,
make it known that I am here and you will experience me in a very lovely, nice way
right, right,
that will be like I'm here and I'm not. It's not a fad. It's not a trend.
right,
I remember the first piece. One of the first pieces. There's a magazine called Yoga Journal
mm-hmm.
that was the top magazine for
Right,
a yoga publication for
right,
years. Um, they they done a couple very small pieces, but one of them they did was it was a little picture.
yeah,
Um, it was like I think it was under trends.
right,
There's a DJ DJing yoga in LA or whatever.
right, right, and it
And
just even all of those words put
yeah,
together
it
is
was
yeah,
just like, you know, it was just whatever.
yeah,
And now, over however many years later,
right,
like I'm still doing my thing.
right,
But all that being said is I stuck to it. I stuck to my guns.
right,
I I I knew that there was another form of paying dues.
right,
Um, I also knew that I was going to move. I don't know if quicker is the word, but I was going to navigate it differently just because I was
you've
old.
got
You know,
wisdom, yeah,
I had the experience,
yeah,
and not only that, but playing with musicians,
right,
watching rooms.
right.
I was already reading rooms
You've
and
been
looking
doing
at
that, yeah.
bodies and um, and so all these things just became what it is.
Right.
And yeah, like by 2009, I think I was in Brazil DJing a yoga class. It was
Right.
probably the biggest that I had DJing at that point.
Right.
It
Right.
was at a festival in Sao Paulo, and there were whatever 8,000 people or something
Right.
like that,
Right. Yeah.
and they were all doing yoga together. And then not long after that came a festival called Wanderlust.
Mm-hmm.
That was their whole thing was music and yoga.
Right.
And even them, they didn't quite have it together.
Right.
They had an idea because, like, they were coming from music, and then, like, the wife or wives, girls, whatever, were
Right.
into yoga.
Right.
So they started it, but like, they needed a lot of help. And
Right.
talk about paying dues, and there was just all kinds of things and obstacles and things
Right.
to get over. But it ended up being amazing and
Right.
crazy influential, and a beautiful opportunity
Right.
for everyone involved, for the attendees and the whole situation.
Right.
And it got so big.
Right.
A lot of people wanted to copy. You know,
Yeah.
it ended up going somewhat globally, all over North America.
Yeah.
And but the movement, and this was something that was going to happen, but they were at the forefront because they were.
Right.
But this was going to happen.
Right. Right.
And just with the popularity as it grew, because I was already in there
Right.
and I had a deep love and respect for the whole thing, I
Right.
I
When the
grew with it.
tide rose, it rose all the ships that were already involved.
Yeah.
And you went in like you've explained to us, which is so dope. You went in with your machete, your b-boy machete, your cultural machete,
Yeah, man.
and you were carving this lane out, and you kept hacking through these forests, and you found some like-minded folks, and you guys started building, and you had to obviously do some explaining and educating sonically and just the whole culturally of what you're bringing and why it fits and how it fits.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for someone to look at your page now or just hear and just think that you just thought it was a cool marketing move to the left, and now you're in front of 8,000 people. And so being able to give you the platform and to educate us on the process of that this is no different than what a Cool Herc or any of them went through when they first started doing these things in small venues and trying to convince people it was worth having this here and why. And so that, without even talking about the nuts and bolts of the business, explains why, how, when, and where it is now. Like you've earned that. You've earned the right to live a life that has slightly more income and more width for you and who you are and who you want to be now. And I think part of the lesson as we're wrapping this up is, omnipotence. Like there's, me, we're sitting here talking about this and we're like, just you explaining your story and just, me sharing my story little bits throughout these episodes, right? Like I always spoke upon diversifying talents, and just not letting people shoot down your omnipotence. And that was a path I had to fight. Like you can't be a rapper and a manager. What are you doing skating while skaters can't make all this shit?
Yep.
And it's because this is a perfect example. Is like you may outgrow the lane you started in. You may outgrow the team that recruited you or drafted you or groomed you. And if you allow yourself to keep growing, you will find the rest or the next chapter or the next episode of your existence that is ready to reward you for all the work you put in, which then makes you both appreciate those early days of doing these underground hip hop shows and kind of paying dues or grinding it out, just really just being about culture first, because it wasn't about monetary. Wasn't enough to go around.
Yeah.
But all that, when we apply it to these other realms and other places, there's just so much room for a greater level of reception, gratitude, and the rewards, currency, spiritually, gratitude, and monetarily.
Yeah.
So that is dope. And I'm glad we've been talking about doing this and sharing this story for a good amount of time. So I'm going to give you the mic. If there's any closing things you want to say, any things you feel like you hadn't said, then go ahead and say it. And otherwise, let people know where to find you.
There's just so much to say. I'm a lover of life and a lover of knowledge, and I just I appreciate everyone who listens to my music, and I'm humbled and honored by it still, and I love it as much as the day that I started. Like searching through record stores with the homies or by myself, whatever. Like just it's this thing for me that just keeps on inspiring me, and across the board art, and I will continue to make all the music that I make, and that includes straight up hip hop.
Right.
I mean, it's the 20-year anniversary of the Capture of Sound.
Right.
I'm gonna do a remix record of that, ways you could find me, DJ Drez on Instagram and djdrez.com. And
spell it.
Yeah.
Just because,
DJ Drez. And I have other names that I use, and do a little looking around on Spotify.
Some little Easter eggs and little cutties.
Yeah, I go. I have another project called Sound Ambassador.
Right.
Find that on Spotify, and Good Crush.
Right.
That's more reggae dub kind of stuff.
Right.
And
Right.
I even put up an album under the name Dr. Easy, which has been my name for a long time.
Right.
And yeah, find me if you want to say what's up or contact me somehow. And I still travel a lot, and
A lot.
yeah, and
You've been inspiring me. I'm like, man, I need to do more.
hey, it's it's all about finding the balance with
Yeah.
all this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
With the art, with business, with health. I mean, there's we get into health and all that. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And just like how human I am,
Right, right.
and it's not all sweet, and that's
Right.
why my albums sound the way they do. Some people are like, "Whoa, you make some melancholy ass shit, like some emo kind of," and it goes all over the place.
It's emotions. It's life.
It reflects life.
And I think, just all the magic that someone who's far from you or far from any, person who's seemingly living the life, quote unquote, doesn't understand the levels of work and just minding the balance, like you're saying, of work, of creation, of liberation, of family, of personal life, personal self growth, child raising, adulting,
Yeah.
like all of these things. We can't. The challenge of being an entrepreneur when you are an artist and you're trying to do business is you can't fully be Peter Pan all times. You have to. Sometimes you got to put on the glasses and just really be an adult.
Straight up.
And that balance is super important. And these episodes are people who have managed that balance because I want to share, some of the edutainment in the gyms. I feel like we admire people for their art a lot more than we admire them for the diligence to navigate turning it into a viable career. There's so much to be said. And so I'm stoked. I'm glad you came out and did this. Man, when I start another podcast about culture and music, and there's just so many, skateboarding, hip hop podcast. I know all that stuff, So, but that's it, man. I really appreciate it. You are the first episode of Arts Empire Season 2.
Can I say one thing?
You can say 2 things.
Okay, check this out. So he got this new Rick Rubin book sitting on the table here.
Yeah.
And I went through it, and I listened to the audiobook. I enjoy audiobooks.
Yep.
Anyway, he was talking about something about playing to play and playing to win.
Right.
And that's something that I live by, that I've never been competitive.
Right.
A little bit here and there, for sure, but not like in the way that a lot of people are.
Right.
Even in skateboarding, I don't even have my trophies anymore. I tossed them a long time ago.
Right.
But I play to play. I don't play to win.
Right.
Meaning I am here to experience it.
Right.
And be up in it. And when it comes to art and business, I think there's such a thing as, oh my God. You know what? I'm going to stop talking because you know why? Because I'll go on and on.
Yeah.
But I do want to say this.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I just cut myself up, guys. Another day, we'll see whatever.
Yeah.
If somebody asks a question, I want to say thank you for asking the questions that you ask, and for seeing what I do. I think it's cool, and I've always appreciated the way you navigate the field.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Yeah, and it's our responsibility as B-boys, hip-hop practitioners that as we expand to realms that would make our true hip-hop elders proud, because we're taking it places where it was never before.
Straight up.
And then reciprocating that vibe, gratitude, education, each one teach one type stuff, and it's important. And man, that's what it is.
Yeah, hip hop is not everything, and it also doesn't have boundaries. So whatever that means to you,
take that with you. Art to empire, baby. Turn that art into an empire. Do it.
I turned my art into an empire. I turned my art into an empire. I turned my art into an empire. I turned my art into an empire.
Dad's multiverse.
I turned my art into an empire.
Yes.
I turned my art into an empire. I turned my art into an empire. I turned my art into an empire.
The podcast is here to unearth the clues, to share gems, wisdom from those who pay dues, to the kings and queens behind the scenes who've done the work, planted seeds, and built the dream. Alter empire, desire for autonomy, dropping tricks of the trade for all of us to peep. Don't sleep, don't sleep. Wake up to find this knowledge on top, edutainment at its finest. Lo and behold, unfold the hidden scroll. It's time to shed the light on the stories untold. This podcast is old, we speak the truth. Each one teach one is the good power youth. Bukue, one step beyond the host. Director of the vibes with a gang of jokes. Tune in, tell a friend, share the wealth of game. Take notes, these words spoke, release the chains. Free up the brain with ideas galore. So many career hacks, mentors to explore. Free up the brain with ideas galore. So many career hacks, mentors to explore for sure.
I turned my art